So, welcome back to the Tech Track here at TROOPERS10 conference, second day. Yeah, we hope you all enjoyed lunch and somehow processed the input of the morning. We're going to proceed with the talk covering the famous topic of virtualization. And as far as I know, there's going to be a tool released here in TROOPERS10 exclusively. So, yeah, please give a warm welcome for Claudio.
Thank you. So, thank you for being here. I'll try to get it quite slow in the beginning since we're all processing food. I have to admit I'm quite surprised because this is the first time in my life everything is working at the first try, projector, clock. So if the computer explodes, please start yelling so I can notice that. So let me introduce myself. I'm Claudio Criscione. I work as a principal consultant in a small company based in Milan called Secure Network. And I also have the fortune to participate in a security research group called NibbleSec. And they look bad. But anyway, I'm earning my PhD degree at the Politecnico di Milano in my free time, that is from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. And I'm also an editor at virtualization.info, which is a blog devoted to virtualization, as you might guess. I take care of the security aspects of the blog. As far as where I come from a small third world country down in the south called Italy, which you might know for some of our stuff. Some of them I'm proud of, some of them are not. But anyway, that's the country. And by the way, this is the address of my portal. You can find everything you not care about me there. And as from Italy, I guess you know some of our specialities like pizza and mandolini and all the other stuff. But I guess you don't know that we have one very important thing in Italy, which we are very proud of. That is, we are the most well-known makers of Western movies. Sergio Leone, which is the best director from, they call them spaghetti Western, but okay. We made Clint Eastwood, Bronson, and so on. We are quite famous for that, and I'm really proud. But anyway, what has Western movies to do with virtualization security? Actually, I don't know, but I wanted to show you this. So let's speak about something completely different, and let's speak about real-world virtualization security, okay? So from now on, I will take this stance when I speak about virtualization security. I just presume we are getting to this new town in the old Western, and we are exploring a new world. I won't speak as the SensePost guy before about the cloud stuff, cloud computing stuff, which is super cool, but it's way too wild for me, at the moment at least. So we'll start with lower level stuff, not so low level, but I will start with the things that you can actually deploy in your company, that you can actually see in your company, see them running. That's what I will care for. So we will start looking at virtualization security just like it was a small, complex town in the Western, in the Old West, the Wild West. So we will see there are a lot of fake facades all around, hiding the small buildings which are behind that, and that's virtualization security from my perspective. When you start looking at the city, you start noticing that you have really a lot of components working together to provide you with virtualization technologies. Before we push forward, how many of you are currently using some virtualization techniques? Anyone? Oh, okay, everyone. Perfect then. When I started doing this kind of research like 5 years ago, almost no one was raising his hands, so things changed a lot. So we will start with what you are for sure familiar with. That is, what is the most famous building, the most important building in any small town in the Wild West? Yeah, the saloon, obviously. Because that's the core part of the city. That's where you get drunk, and that's where everyone wants to start a fight in. Everyone is aiming at the saloon. In our example, the saloon is the hypervisor. It is the actual part of the machine which is running your code, your virtual code, which is actually running the virtualization stuff, okay? Everyone is looking at that. It can be shared abroad, that is, you can run that as an hosted solution on your Windows machine. I'm not that interested on that at the moment. More on that later. But the point is, at the moment, everyone is looking at the hypervisor. You see a lot of exploits aiming the hypervisor. We heard about the cloud burst exploit before, and I agree. That's, I think, the single most critical part in any virtualization risk consideration, risk assessment. But yet, that's not the only part. That's not the only thing you should be concerned about when it comes to virtualization. Any sheriff knows that the actual important part of your city is the emporium, is the place where you manage the city, because that's where goods are traded, that's where goods move. So we will be far more concerned about how you actually manage your infrastructure. Because yes, if I can break the hypervisor, I can do guest to host attack, guest to guest. Yeah, there are a lot of stuff. But that's very hard. I can't really read assembly, nor I can speak the ancient language of CPUs. I can't. But I can easily hack a web application. That's what was pointed at in the talk before lunch, and I totally agree. We are trusting web application to do a lot of things. We are trusting our infrastructure to web application. Not a good idea. But anyway, this is yet one more component. It's not the only one, because the other building you are going to see in any Western city is the bank. It's the storage. That's where the gold lies. That's where you put your virtual machines. That's another critical part of your infrastructure. And if you are considering virtualization security, you have to consider the security of the place where you're putting the virtual machine, because that makes a difference. It really changes if you use a SAN solution, a SAN solution, or an NFS solution, SMB. Okay? But still, that's trivial. There are even more services than that. And things really start to get a bit crowded when you start looking at that, because any modern virtualization solution has got failover, replication, orchestration, accounting, provisioning. There are literally dozens of services. So what you're really interested in is not, can I break the hypervisor? That's not the right question to ask when you approach virtualization security. As I'm sure you were told in the workshop, how many of you followed the workshop on Monday or the day after? Cool. Okay, I'm sure you were told about this issue. So the point is, what is the exposure? Is it risky? Can I employ virtualization? Should I care? How do I test it? That's the point. What is the probability of the engine stacking my city? That's what you should be concerned with. And that's exactly the point of my talk. I'm interested in understanding what is the added risk of moving the infrastructure from a physical to a virtual one. I'm interested about the risk of exposing the interface to the internet or managing the machines. And what if I administer them through my internal network? So those are the questions we have to answer. But before we answer these very questions, we have to ask another one. We need new tools. We have to ask ourselves, do we already have all the tools we need to do this stuff? My opinion is no, we don't have the tools. Why? Because at the moment, most of the tools we use are not virtualization aware. They don't really know anything about virtualization. For instance, until 10 days ago, there wasn't even one single Metasploit module to attack virtualization. Not even one. And most of the tools I know of, they don't really cover either VMware or Xen or Hyper-V. They don't. It's quite similar situation of what I've seen in SAP systems. I guess you're familiar with SAP subsystems. They're huge, complex to manage, and completely insecure, but that's my personal opinion. But when it comes to these systems, the main problem is that there are no tools to actually assess them. You only have Sapito, which is the only tool actually available. Or maybe we will be shown later that there are more, but at the moment, that's the only one I really know of. This is the same point. And yet, the corpus of knowledge is so well spread, so you can find virtualization-related stuff all around the world, all around the place, in various small tool scripts. That's really a problem. So we need new tools. This is my opinion. This is why I started researching on this issue, on this field. That is introducing VASTO. That is the core point of my talk. What is VASTO? Well, VASTO is a very nice city in Italy. It's a small city with nothing to do from morning to night but to research on virtualization, I guess. So that's why I gave it this name. It was written by me and Paolo Canaletti at Secure Network. And It basically is a collection of Metasploit modules. If you don't know what Metasploit is, then you better start researching now on the website. But basically, Metasploit is, I guess, the most well-known open-source penetration testing framework. It is the de facto standard for penetration testing in the open-source world, at least. Then you can have a core and Canvas, whatever you want. But if you stick to open source, then it's Metasploit for you. It is Ruby-based, easily extendable, and it's really lit, apart from the mascot, which I don't like. But it's quite easy to build stuff inside it. So my idea was, let's start building some modules. Let's start building an infrastructure inside Metasploit so we can start assessing virtualized infrastructure with the proper tools and integrating with what we already know. Then comes VASTO. The approach we are going to use is the realistic one. Why? Because if we are to assess virtualized environments, we have to think about them as real-world virtualization. I know that most vendors say, if you use it properly, it's secure. Yes, but no one will be using that properly. Even Windows, if you use it properly, secure. But it's quite hard to see people actually using that as it should. So that's the approach we are using. We will use. In real world, you will see weak passwords. We see a lack of updates. Updating is a nightmare in virtualized environments. Because when you update, you have to take into account the fact that you have the virtual machine running on top of the host. So if you want to update the host, you have to take care about the virtual machine. Shall I move it? Shall I turn them off? It's sort of a nightmare. There are solutions to ease that, but in my experience, they are used in less than 10% of the cases. Most notably, there is one thing which I want to make clear as soon as possible. For the better part of what I'm going to show you, the vendor's response will be just isolate the management network. Sure, never seen one. Never seen it even once. In most cases, you can't do that. You already built the infrastructure. You already have your network. The management network maybe is used for a dozen of things, like doing backups or moving files or doing whatever you want. So you can't really rely on that. This is not a protection. I don't know about your networks, but the networks I know are not full of walls and holes for the attacker to fall into. They don't look like these. They're not rational. They're not well built. They look more like these. Okay? This is my personal experience, at least. So this is the approach I took when I started researching on VASTO. So you can't really trust network segregation. This is not the right approach. You should not believe that this will save it. This will save you. Because in the long term, virtualization hosts will just be yet one more server. Okay? One more server to manage, keep updated, handle them, connect to them, manage them through web interfaces, just like the others. That's the way I'm seeing that deployed in real world. Okay, so what? Well, if you start thinking about that, you notice that it is a real problem. Because I started wondering, how can I convince them that it is a real problem? I just ran a search on Shodan. Shodan is a free, you can use it through the internet, search engine for computers. So I basically ran ESX, which is the name of one well-known virtualization product, without any kind of filter or whatever, just ESX, and that's it. And I got a couple of hundreds of results in, really, 1 second. And these results are changing, and those are VMware servers which are exposed to the internet. Those are web interfaces exposed to the internet. So yes, it is a real problem. People are actually doing that. In Italy, we have a very interesting example of a really large provider called NGI. And this provider is selling virtual machines, which you simply access through your virtual infrastructure client or web interface, publicly exposed. So that's the way people are implementing that in the real world. If you want to check, apart from ESX, you can try with ESXi to get a little less servers, because it's just about the location. It's not in the header, so it's quite a little bit more difficult. I have a couple of Google Docs. I'm not releasing them because the statistics I made, which are not on the slides for a reason, tells me that more or less 85% of the hosts I found on the internet are vulnerable to various kinds of attacks. So watch out for the Google Doc about that. Or try with VMware. Once again, more results. and all of them are different, and most of them are vulnerable to various attacks we will see. So it is a real problem. You have to cope with that. Okay, fine, I understood. I cannot trust network segregation. So what? Well, let's start looking at that. What we see now is about the VI client or vSphere client. I guess you're familiar with that. It's simply the VMware client, which you have to use to manage your virtual infrastructure. You can use the web interface as well, but most people just use the binary. The login procedure for the binary is quite simple and unclear, but anyway, the first step is the client requesting an XML file, /client/clients.xml, okay? And the server answers with a file containing various versions and an auto-update URL. That is their client. If you're too old to speak with me, please update yourself and let's see each other later. If the client gets through, then he asks for a service instance, which gets answered, and for the service status, which gets answered. Then once again for the client, clients.xml, just in case. And then there is the login procedure. All of this stuff goes through SSL, which, as we know, is the most secure protocol in the world, and it's just those are just SOAP messages over port 443. So that's what you're basically using. If you have an exposed web interface, then you can use the clients. In my experience, 90% of the guys who are actually managing virtual machines are doing that through this client. Let's get a little bit deeper in the auto-update stuff. This is the file which is passed from the server to the client. As you will see, there is configured a properly formatted XML file with a couple of information like connection ID, the port and version, the patch version, the API version, the download URL, and so on. Now, since you're interested in security, you will surely notice those big red lines where we have the download URL and the patch version. So the first time I saw that, and I asked myself, patch version, download URL, what's about the star over there? So I basically tried to change with a very trivial, BARP request, the answer that the server was giving to this. So just returned a very high patch version and an arbitrary download URL. And I was kind of expecting, oh, come on, this is auto-update feature. There will be code signing and what the hell, I don't know. They will be protecting that. And yeah, of course, if you can do man in the middle, you will also get the password. But we're not that interested in the password. Come on, it's man in the middle. The point is we are turning man in the middle is something far more defiant-like that evil payload.exe. So what I basically done is I deployed the lurker. I just changed the clients.xml as it's traveling back to the client through a man-in-the-middle or fake server attack. I manipulate the answer from the server and just have the client download whatever binary I want. The update package will run under the user's privilege, and you can bet that they are running that as administrators because all the administrators are using that console. And so what we do, we just provide a Trojan package. Or you can also combine that with more advanced attack like the SMB relay or whatever you want. So this is the first module I'm going to show you, because the lurker was the first module to be implemented in VASTO. Basically, the attack works like that. You set up a fake web interface, a fake web page that is actually the whole stack of the web server, of the ESX web server. We also have a web page to make it look legit. You can do that either as a man-in-the-middle or a rogue attack. And once again, people are using that over the internet. I tried that with a Tor node, and I got something between 5 to 12 connections a week, which is not that bad considering that you get to own the boxes. Then I just lay the trap and wait. Obviously, the attack will trigger a certificate invalid certificate error, obviously, because we are using a fake certificate, but 90% of the people who are using VMware are using a fake certificate because they're using the default one. They're not really using trusted certificates. They should, they are not. So this is the first thing I'm going to show you in order to wake you up. I've got this very nice demo. Let's start with this one, because then I'll tell you about my travel here. So what you're basically going to see is me using, can you read that? Is it too small? Yeah, because I cannot zoom that, so you have to look. You will see me using the Metasploit framework in order to trigger the VI lurker attack. On the right side, there is the client, the VI client. This is the latest vSphere client, triggering the exploit. So what we basically do is we load the module, use auxiliary, then we take a look at the options. Basically, you can decide which payload you want to use, which port you want to use, if you want to use SSL and so on, but those are just basic Metasploit configuration. If you are familiar with Metasploit, you will be familiar with those as well. For those who are not, basically, I can decide any kind of payload. I'm using a Meterpreter, which is a very cool shell, a custom shell, which was built for, well, it's not really a shell, but let's presume. It's a shell which has been built for Metasploit. So basically, I'm uploading that shell on the remote host. I can also tweak a little with the configuration, like the port I want to use, if I want to do that on reverse, and so on. You can upload any kind of binary anyway. So I just set up the port I want to use on the remote server once the exploit gets triggered, and I start the exploit. Then I'm using the vSphere client. Obviously, here I'm remoting on a remote server. Okay, so this on the left side it happens on the attacker machine. The right side is the victim machine. So I just connect to the attacker machine. That is the attacker IP address. But once again, you can run this through man in the middle. I enter a random password, and as I told you, you get a certificate warning, but yeah, who cares? In my opinion, most administrators read that as view certificate equals to lose your time or stop working and please let me continue working. I have a job to do. So it's just ignore. And just get an informative messages. You have to update your client. It's an old version. No information whatsoever on why you have to update, how you have to update, whatever. Just run, save, and that's it. So basically, you run the update, run the installer. It starts working. We generate the payload, and we get the information. OK, I'm going to install the installer and reboot. For now, for this time, I used a very lame payload, which will not get through any firewall or whatever. It's very basic and lame payload. So now you will see a Windows prompt telling me, hey, this software wants to open a connection. Obviously, you can do that better. But for now, we just stick to that. So my exploit is run. Oh, yeah, sure. It's the upload feature. Works anyway. And on the attacker machine, we just, at this point, use the exploit multi-handler, that is a feature in Metasploit which can be used to connect to remote honed boxes, and connect to the remote server. So we set the IP address of the remote server and just, connect to the server. From now on, it's LIS and, game over. Okay, we just own the box through the auto-update feature. Maybe later I can, well, thank you. Okay, since I got this cheer up, I'm going to show you this one as well. I'm going to tell you about my travel. It was, well, I had to come from Milan, which is, on the other side of the world. So it took me more or less 10 hours to get here because an old girl thought it could be snow. I think so, but I'm not sure what the outcome was. I'm not really that into football. Anyway, yes, but, it doesn't really count. So anyway, as I was saying, when I was getting here and not being interested in football, as I'm not ever, I started coding this one, which is quite interesting. Oh, outcomes. Half of the video got screwed. Okay, see? You see? You talk about Milan, and that's what happens. So basically, I coded a slightly different version, especially for troopers, that is, call it an Easter egg, okay? So if you set mode we are troopers and run the exploit, you get a special payload, especially for you. Oh, same stuff once again, so you ignore, yes, I want to run the installer. If you save, by the way, you don't see the real name of the exploit. So I get this funny, stuff, but then, okay, you just close the stuff, and afraid goes away, but it just won't. Okay, so use it at your own risk, okay? You've been warned, that's an Easter egg, but it's not one of the safe ones. Okay, fine. Back to the presentation. That was the first module I coded in VASTO, and the first one you can test. It's not the only one, obviously, because there is far more. What about the other clients? Well, the other clients are even worse. I mean, VMware Converter client doesn't really check for SSL certificates, so you can do the same, and you can do even worse because they don't check for SSL certificates. And VMware Server version 1 doesn't check for VMware for client-side for server certificates at all. And the same goes for Open Xen Center. By the way, if you're trying Xen Cloud Platform at the moment, you can only use through the Open Xen Center, which goes over HTTP, no encryption whatsoever. So the situation is not that good. This huge sign means that we are working on the modules. They are actually working, but 1 in 3 times they blew your computer, so I'm not releasing them at the moment. But if you want to beta test, then we can talk. Okay, so this was about the client. The point is, it's not just about the client, it's about the sheriff as well. It's about the management interface as well. Because after all, you have to trust someone, so, okay, I'm using my client because that's the only way I can connect to the remote server, but I will trust the management interface. I will use web interfaces, I will use whatever. I just won't update my clients. And then I'm solved. No, obviously not. You have to think the other way around as well. Not the way you're thinking, but the other way. And you can just shoot the sheriff. I mean, the easiest way to actually break inside the infrastructure is to get to know your guy, understand the man, and shoot him. For instance, you can use some of the remote exploits which are widely available, and we are porting to VASTO. But before showing that and before running them, you have to, know who you're speaking boom. That is when the fingerprinting module, I will show you in 1 second, comes into play. So basically, we are doing something which was not done before. That is, we are fingerprinting VMware services and Xen services with, I think, a sufficient degree of precision. So we basically just set the remote host and have it run, and we can fingerprint either VMware ESX or ES6i down to the build version and API version, which is just what you need if you have to run an exploit, okay? Okay. Not very impressive, but it's there. And there was no other way to do that before that. Once you know the sheriff, you can start thinking about the way you will hack him. Probably the easiest way is to bribe the war, that is, go in through some other services. For instance, hack the Active Directory, hack the LDAP authorization, and all this kind of stuff. These are the things we actually do when we do pen testing on virtual infrastructure. We own whatever is using, whatever is around the virtual infrastructure to get in. But yes, that's not that interesting for you at the moment. So what you can do is use one technique which is quite common in Western movies, that is torture. So you can just brute force the password, because 90% of these systems, they don't have any account lockout, account lock protection, password complexity enforcement, nothing. They're just back in the 80s. So you can easily brute force them, and maybe later, if we've got time, I'll show you the modules for brute forcing both VMware and Xen. Once again, it's not that easy because you have to go through their APIs and custom protocols and so on. But yes, you can easily brute force it. Okay, fine. Yet not enough. Because in the end, if the password is strong enough, if the infrastructure is secure, you really have to hit the management interface directly. That's when the traversing the path stuff comes into play. I actually researched this bug back in September. And I was really, whoa, I found this beautiful bug, and I started developing the exploit, and then all of a sudden, this guy at ShmooCon released the exploit and the patch. Okay, fine, game over. But anyway, what is it all about? Basically, it is path traversal in almost all VMware products, that the ESX, ESXi, and Server version 2, which can be easily exploited as unauthenticated access with root privileges. And that's it. You only have to be able to reach the management interface. And that's it. It's that easy? Yes, it is. It has been implemented as a simple HTTP request, like that. That's a very complex technique. And you can just download any kind of file you want. They implemented them, the guys who released that as Shmookon, they implemented that as a Perl tool, name it guest stealer, which works, but it's not integrated in Metasploit. We only want one tool. I don't want to learn 1 gazillion tools to do different stuff. So what we basically done, ported it in VASTO and Metasploit. There is a scanner released by kernel Ownage, Chris Gates, but it's just a scanner. It won't really, exploit the vulnerability. By the way, why do I believe in exploiting the vulnerability? Well, because in my experience, if you don't exploit, the customer won't care. If you don't exploit, your manager won't care. Yeah, there is a possibility of vulnerability, cool, sure. But is it exploitable? Yeah, it should be. Can you show me? Well, no. Then they don't really care about that. So, in my opinion, full disclosure is doing really good for the overall security of our world. Anyway, how does the guest stealer stuff work? Well, basically, you load the module. So, if it starts, okay, you load the module. You have some options in the module, like you can choose the local dir where you want to download the file, the actual file name you want to download, and the operation, which is the only peculiar part. That is, you can either decide to get the list of the virtual machines which are running on the remote server, or get a particular file. Let's start with an easy one. So we set the operation to file. We leave the file as /etc/shadow. We set the remote host to the VMware server. This is a vulnerable VMware server. We download the file to /tmp, and there you go. Okay? So that's root access to the box. But then I want a virtual machine which are running on the remote host. That's what I'm interested in. So we just change the operation to list, and there you go. We retrieve the list of the guests running on the host, on the remote host. So we just set the file to the name of the virtual machine. We run the exploit once again. Well, we change the operation back to file. That's when I had to do the video 10 times. We start downloading the virtual machine, complete with a virtual disk. Just, thank you, give me your guest. Takes some time to be downloaded, but you can basically do that with relative impunity because no one is actually looking at the logs of the ESX web server. Come on, who's looking at that? So you just download the guest, run it, steal the data, do whatever you want. Okay? No credits for this exploit for me, but it's working. So that's yet another method to get inside a VMware. But if there is any VMware employee here, then probably they're a little bit angry, so let's speak bad about the other players as well. I got a very nice one about Xen. How many of you are using Xen anyway? 1, 2, wow, it's very popular. Okay, so let's speak about Xen. They use it to have a web interface. They use it to. The name was Xen Source Web. It was a very nice web interface which you could use to manage your whole stack of Xen server. It really worked. We took a look at that, obviously, and it broke, crumbled to dust. And they had like dozen remote code execution, file exclusions, cross-site scripting, well, the whole array. It was just a sample. They told me, Citrix told me, it's not supported, it's a sample. If you download, you do that at your own risk. And I thought, okay. I mean, if you're managing a production environment, you're running that on your own responsibility, who's going to use that? And even worse, who's going to use that over the internet? Then I took a look at the, forums, and there is this guy. Do a Google search for his name, and you'll be amazed. But anyway, this guy was using that to manage the Xen file to the BlackBerry. Okay, so maybe it was a best server, but yeah, people were actually using that. So, how responsible do you think vendors are at the moment about virtualization security? Are they serious about virtualization security? I reported some critical bugs. I mean, I broke the interface, basically. But happens. Let's fix it. Okay, what was the reaction of the vendor? Ta-da! They removed the product. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so this is the, security response of the vendors. And by the way, the lurker attack was reported to VMware about Jan or July. I've not released the tool since, but they know about that. Try on your latest version. Tell me if it works. So that was the answer from Citrix. So it's interfaces have the same security issues as well, and now you're going to have the tools to test them. What about the rest? Well, what does it all mean? You actually have to do that network segregation, and now you have a reason to ask for the budget to do that. Now you can test and prove that you actually need to segregate those networks, okay? It probably is a good idea to monitor the traffic you are generating with our client or with your web interface for anomalies. Can I suggest Mazipti for you? If you're interested in that, talk to you later. It's a web firewall, an anomaly-based web application firewall. But anyway, open source. And most importantly, no internet exposition, well, exposition is not the right word, but no internet-facing servers, okay? Never, in my opinion. Obviously, it's not over. Now you see how Mazipti can help you actually break inside virtual machines to recover your password, obviously, because it's illegal to break inside someone's machine. But once you're inside, what can you do? Well, in any Western movies, once the renegade has won, owns the town, he wants to become the sheriff. He wants long-time control of the virtual machines. And we all know how this translates in our security world. It means rootkitting the virtual machine, trojanizing the virtual machines. It's not as easy as it might seem, because most formats are custom, are proprietary. There are no details on that. For instance, VMDKs or VHDs. I mean, it's quite hard to assess those systems. However, we do have some proprietary library which we can leverage to assess the system. So once you get access to the virtual infrastructure, you can either just turn off all the virtual machine, or you can put Trojans in them by directly accessing their hard drive. This one is working, it's finished, but I've not yet tested that in production environment. So if you want to take the risk, drop me a line. Basically, we do have a script, which is a double-click script, which will Trojanize any virtual machine, which you have access to, obviously. Bottom line, even one access to the virtual machine will mean losing control of the virtual infrastructure. Even one. It doesn't take to be long-time access. Last point, shoot the pianist. In any Western movie, you have people shooting the piano player every time. I don't know why. They just shoot the piano player. This is important because up to now, we have concentrated ourselves. We've spoken about client-side attacks and server-side attacks. Fine. But server-side attacks are quite a complex matter, as I told you. There are a lot of shops in our town, a lot of stuff. It's not just the hypervisor and the management. There are all the low protection, not well understood services which are helping you manage your infrastructure. For instance, any one of you who has implemented VMware knows that the first step is converting all your virtual machine and taking them to virtual, for instance. Or maybe you start a new. But anyway, you're going to use supporting services. So what we've basically done is to take a look at the ecosystem, the third-party softwares. Well, I can tell you that out of 30 softwares we audited, 29 had remote exploitable code execution bugs, which is not bad percentile. Unfortunately, 6 months after, only one, VirtualTout, actually patched the vulnerability. So we're waiting for the others. So I can't disclose that. But I can disclose one quite interesting one. Because if I tell you about Tout Virtual, you most likely don't know about them because they are small engines and very nice people. But if I tell you about VMware, then you know them. And supporting services, well, VMware has got a lot of them. Let's take one which you most likely don't know about. Let's call it VMware Studio. It's a virtual appliance which you can use to build other virtual appliances. What we've basically seen is if you break inside this one, you're going to take the virtual appliances which have been built with VMware Studio, which most likely are core information, because maybe your company is doing business with that, very likely. Or, even more likely, we will get the passwords which you will use to deploy the virtual machines to the remote server. So, it's fine enough, it's good enough if I break inside one of these machines. Obviously, we do have a very nice vulnerability on this one. File upload with a next code execution, because you can upload Python files and have them executed as root. And once again, you have that as a VASTO plugin to test. You can just run and against any VMware Studio instances before our release. VMware actually patched this one. I was quite astonished because they patched it. They were very nice, involved us in the patching cycle and patched that quite quickly. But anyway, you have the module, you can test that. I can tell you that they didn't patch everything, but we're waiting for another patch on that matter. Okay? So once again, supporting services are vulnerable as well. So you don't have to think about defending just the management interface, just the hypervisor, just the client. You have to defend your virtual infrastructure as a whole body. You have to defend every single point. We know you don't have a perimeter anymore. We know that. We've been told about that. But yet I do believe that we need one for this stuff. We need to fence our virtualized environment and don't let it blend on our old style. Why? Because once you lose one application, okay, you lost the application. Now you lose this application, you lost your whole infrastructure. All eggs in a bag. Okay? Bottom line, take care of the infrastructure as well. Don't really trust third-party software unless they have been tested, truly tested, really tested. I mean, really. And try to implement proper segregation of all this stuff. Pay companies to pen test third-party softwares you're going to use. That's a good idea. Conclusions. The first one is something I really do believe in. When a man with a 45 meets a man with a rifle, a man with a gun is a dead man. Why? Because it has bigger gun. Bigger guns win. That's the idea of VASTO. I want to give the community a bigger gun to assess virtualization stuff. So we are developing new models, we are developing tools. I do believe that a theoretical vulnerability doesn't do any good to anyone, because it's just theoretical. People want patch, you need the tool. I love scripty kiddies from that perspective. I think they have done good in the long term, but that's not the matter. And about virtualization security, I feel it's not yet well understood. If you don't test it, security doesn't really exist. Okay? So I'm a strong believer of this issue. And I think this pretty much sums it up. What is the future of VASTO? We'll develop more modules. We're looking for mad people with a lot of time to lose as beta testers. And we will try to be the reference for virtualization penetration testing, developing all the exploits we can put our dirty hands on. Thank you. Any question? Okay. So one more thing. That should be the address to download the stuff. It's not online now. Give me more or less 1 hour it will be, or just come with your USB key full of Trojan, and I will just copy it, okay? Thank you.
So thank you very much for this interesting talk, and of course for the work on the tool and finally releasing it. So are there any questions?
Actually, one of the main advantages of using Metasploit is that you start from outside, but once you penetrate either the host or the guest through one of these vulnerabilities, you can just deploy the whole array of Metasploit stuff inside the host or the guest and continue the attack from there, which is quite interesting. Okay, so try it and let me know what you think about that, okay?
So thanks again, and if there are no questions, we're going to have a short break, switch the laptops, and then continue in a couple of minutes.
Am I on time?